It started with something as simple as a dinner plan. Rachel had texted me mid-morning, suggesting we try a new Italian place downtown. That wasn't like her. She usually left the planning to me, claiming I had the better taste in restaurants. But I didn't question it. After all, it was rare lately for her to take initiative in our time together. By the time I arrived, the restaurant was buzzing with life. Candles flickered on tables, the scent of garlic and fresh bread filled the air, and a soft hum of chatter enveloped the space. Rachel was already seated, looking stunning in a burgundy dress I hadn't seen before. I caught her glancing around nervously as I approached, but her face lit up when she saw me. "Hey, you're here," she greeted, a little too enthusiastically. "Yeah," I said, leaning in for a quick kiss. Her perfume was different, sweeter than usual. "You look amazing. What's the occasion? Can't a wife just dress up for her husband?" She teased, her eyes darting to her phone on the table. I noticed her swipe it up quickly and slide it into her purse. A small detail, but it lingered in my mind like the aftertaste of something bitter. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to my own overthinking. The dinner went smoothly at first. We laughed about an overly dramatic waiter and talked about an upcoming trip we'd been planning. Still, there was something just slightly off. She wasn't checking her phone, which was strange for Rachel, who couldn't go 5 minutes without a scroll. And she kept looking over my shoulder, as if someone or something behind me was more interesting than the conversation. Halfway through our main course, I excused myself to the restroom. On my way back, weaving through the tightly packed tables, I saw her. She wasn't at our table anymore. Instead, Rachel stood near the entrance, facing away from me, talking animatedly to someone I couldn't see. Her body language was electric, almost flirtatious. Her hand on her hip, her laugh light and airy. I slowed my pace, hiding behind a pillar just as she reached out and placed a hand on the shoulder of the man she was speaking with. I couldn't see his face, but the moment felt intimate in a way that made my chest tighten. Then, like clockwork, Rachel stepped back, glancing around as if making sure no one had noticed. She quickly returned to our table and sat down just as I rounded the corner to rejoin her. "Everything okay?" I asked, sliding into my seat. "Yeah, of course." She smiled, her cheeks just a little too pink. "Did you want dessert?" "No, I'm good," I said, watching her closely. "Did you know someone here? I thought I saw you talking to someone near the door." Her face didn't falter. She was quick. "I'll give her that. Oh, just a coworker from work. Total coincidence." I didn't even recognize him at first. I nodded, pretending to buy the excuse. But inside, the pieces didn't add up. Her shiftiness earlier, the overly dressed look, her laugh with that stranger. Something was brewing beneath the surface, and for the first time, I felt like I was looking at someone I didn't fully know. As we left the restaurant, she clung to my arm, humming softly like everything was perfect. I couldn't shake the image of her standing so close to that man. And then it happened. We walked toward the car, but I accidentally left my wallet on the table. I told her I'd be right back and headed back inside. Instead of going to our table, I scanned the room until I saw the man Rachel had been talking to. He was seated at the bar now, scrolling through his phone. Without thinking, I took a seat 2 stools away and ordered a drink. I kept my head down, pretending to be engrossed in my phone, until I heard the buzz of his phone on the counter. I glanced sideways, just enough to catch the name on the screen. Rachel. My pulse hammered in my ears. The man didn't answer, but the smug look on his face said enough. I drained my drink, stood up, and left, my mind racing. Rachel was outside waiting in the car, smiling as if the evening had been a fairy tale. But now I knew better. Something was wrong. And this time I wasn't going to let it slide. That night I couldn't sleep. Rachel fell asleep almost instantly, her breathing soft and steady beside me. But I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of the evening. The man at the bar, her name on his phone, the fake nonchalance in her voice when she explained away their meeting. My gut twisted every time I thought about it. I wasn't going to accuse her outright, not yet. If I confronted her too soon, she'd just deny it or twist the story. No, I needed to know for sure. The next morning, Rachel seemed lighter, almost cheerful. She hummed in the kitchen as she made her coffee, her phone sitting face down on the counter again. I watched her from the doorway, trying to reconcile the woman I'd loved for years with the one I now suspected was lying to me. "Anything fun planned today?" I asked casually. She didn't even look up. "Just work. It's going to be a busy day, so don't wait up for me tonight." That was odd. Rachel's job rarely required late hours, and when it did, she usually made a point of calling me to complain about it. "Late night?" I probed. "Yeah, some project deadlines," she said, sipping her coffee. "You know how it is." I nodded, hiding the knot of unease growing in my chest. As soon as she left for work, I grabbed her old tablet, the one she barely used anymore. It was still logged into her email, so I started searching. Nothing seemed out of place at first: work emails, newsletters, the usual junk. But then I found it. A receipt for a room at a boutique hotel downtown. 2 nights ago. My blood ran cold. 2 nights ago, she had told me she was at Stacy's for a girls' night. I sat there, staring at the screen, my thoughts spiraling. Who was she with? The man from the bar? Someone else? I needed more. That evening, I decided to act on impulse. I left work early and headed to the hotel listed on the receipt. The lobby was sleek and modern, bustling with tourists and business travelers. I approached the front desk, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, I think my wife might have left something in the room she stayed in a couple of nights ago. Could you tell me which room she was in?" "Her name's Rachel Parker." The receptionist hesitated, glancing down at her computer. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out that information." I clenched my fists but forced a smile. "Of course, I understand. Could you at least check if she left anything behind? I'd hate for her to lose something important." The receptionist nodded, disappearing into the back. A few minutes later, she returned, shaking her head. Nothing was left in the room. I thanked her and walked out, feeling like I'd hit a dead end. But as I stepped outside, I spotted something that made my heart stop. Across the street, sitting at an outdoor cafe, was Rachel. And she wasn't alone. She was laughing, her head tilted back, her hand resting on the arm of the man sitting across from her. The same man from the bar. I ducked behind a parked car, my heart pounding. What were the chances? Did she think I wouldn't find her here? Or did she just not care anymore? I watched them for a few minutes, my stomach twisting with every gesture of familiarity between them. Then, without thinking, I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. I could see her reach for her phone on the table. She glanced at the screen, hesitating for just a second before answering. "Hey," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. "What's up?" I watched as she spoke, her free hand fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "Nothing much," I said, keeping my tone light. "Just thought I'd call and say hi." "Where are you?" "Oh, I'm at the office," she lied smoothly. "I told you it'd be a late night." I felt the blood drain from my face. At that exact moment, the man across from her leaned forward and said something that made her laugh. "That's funny," I said, my voice low and steady, "'cause I'm looking at you right now, and you're definitely not at the office." Rachel froze. Her head whipped around, scanning the street until her eyes landed on me. Her expression shifted from shock to something harder, colder. She ended the call without a word. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the distance. And then, like a guilty thief caught in the act, she grabbed her purse, said something to the man, and bolted toward the parking lot. I didn't follow her. Not yet. Let her run. Let her sit with the knowledge that I knew. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't go home right away. I needed time to think, to let the rage simmer down before it boiled over. Rachel was a master manipulator when cornered, and if I confronted her unprepared, I'd end up falling into her web of lies again. Instead, I stayed in my car, parked across the street from the cafe, watching. The man hadn't left yet. He sat there for a while, fiddling with his phone and occasionally glancing toward the parking lot, likely wondering why Rachel had vanished so abruptly. I took a picture of him. Not for revenge or anything dramatic, just insurance. I didn't even know his name, but I knew he'd be important when the dust settled. When I finally drove home, Rachel's car was already in the driveway. The house was eerily quiet when I stepped inside. No music, no TV. Just the faint sound of her pacing in the living room. She froze when she saw me, her eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and defiance. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then she broke the silence. Care to explain why you were stalking me? She snapped, crossing her arms like she was the one wronged. I laughed. A harsh, bitter sound that even surprised me. Stalking you? That's rich, Rachel. How about you explain why you were at a cafe with another man while you were supposedly working late? She rolled her eyes, her defenses kicking into high gear. You're being ridiculous. That was just a coworker. We were going over a project, and I didn't want to deal with your paranoia, so I didn't tell you. A coworker, I repeated, pulling out my phone. I held up the picture I'd taken of the man. This coworker? Her face flickered just for a second, but it was enough. You're acting like a crazy person, she said, her voice rising. Do you hear yourself right now? Following me, taking pictures like some kind of psycho? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I stepped closer, my voice low and sharp. What's wrong with me is that my wife is lying to my face. You weren't at work. You weren't with Stacy the other night. And that man? He's not just a coworker, is he? Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, she didn't have an immediate response. I pressed on. I know about the hotel, Rachel. 2 nights ago. Want to explain that? Her eyes narrowed, and she let out a cold laugh. Oh, so now you're snooping through my emails? Is that who we are now? Spying, stalking, accusing? Maybe if you spent half as much energy on our marriage as you do playing detective, we wouldn't be in this mess. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Don't you dare turn this on me. I've been breaking my back trying to make this marriage work, and you've been sneaking around behind my back. At least have the decency to admit it. She scoffed, shaking her head like I was some lost cause. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I was at the hotel. But not for what you think. I needed space. Away from you, away from all of this. She gestured vaguely around the room, her frustration boiling over. Space? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You needed space, so you booked a hotel room? Alone? Yes, she snapped. Is that so hard to believe? God, you're suffocating sometimes, James. Always questioning, always assuming the worst. I just needed to breathe. Her words were sharp, calculated to hurt, but I wasn't buying it. And the man at the cafe? I asked. She hesitated just for a fraction of a second. He's a friend. That's all. You've turned something innocent into this circus in your head. Then why lie about it? I demanded. Why not just tell me the truth if it's so innocent? Her gaze hardened, and she threw up her hands. Because you're impossible, James. You see what you want to see. No matter what I say, you've already made up your mind. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one I thought I knew. You're unbelievable, I said quietly. She crossed her arms again, her posture defiant. You're right, I am. And maybe that's your real problem. You can't handle the fact that I don't fit into your perfect little box. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, we just stood there. 2 people who had shared everything now standing on opposite sides of a crumbling bridge. Finally, I spoke. If there's nothing going on, Rachel, prove it. Show me your phone. Her face went pale, and for the first time, she looked truly afraid. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Instead, she grabbed her purse and stormed past me toward the door. Where are you going? I called after her. Out, she snapped, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been, my mind racing. Whatever secrets she was hiding, one thing was clear. Rachel wasn't the woman I thought she was. And whatever this was between us, it was about to get a lot worse. Rachel didn't come home that night. I sat in the darkened living room, the silence punctuated only by the occasional hum of passing cars. My phone buzzed once, an automated work email, and then nothing. I wasn't expecting her to call or text. Rachel's go-to tactic when things got heated was to disappear until she could rewrite the narrative in her favor. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I thought about calling her family, maybe even Stacy, but I stopped myself. Dragging other people into this mess felt premature. I didn't need their opinions. I needed the truth. The truth came faster than I expected. The next morning, I got a call from my friend Kyle, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. We weren't particularly close. More like casual friends who caught up occasionally over beers. So when his name flashed on my screen, I almost didn't answer. But something in me said to pick up. Hey man, Kyle said, his tone hesitant. I wasn't sure if I should call, but I saw something last night, and I thought you should know. My heart dropped. What is it? I was at that bar near Green Street, the one with the rooftop patio, and, Rachel was there. With some guy. My grip on the phone tightened. Are you sure it was her? Yeah, man, I'm sure. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but they didn't exactly look like coworkers. I didn't say anything to her. Thought it'd be better to tell you first. My chest felt like it was going to cave in. Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it. No problem, he said, his voice laced with awkward sympathy. If you need anything, let me know. I hung up, my mind racing. So she wasn't just out. She was with him. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the clock, waiting for Rachel to come home. It wasn't until mid-afternoon that I heard the familiar rumble of her car in the driveway. She walked in wearing the same dress from the day before. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and she carried an air of practiced indifference. You're here, she said, like it was some sort of surprise. I stood up, crossing my arms. We need to talk. Rachel sighed, dropping her purse on the counter. Can it wait? I'm exhausted. No, I said firmly. Can't. She rolled her eyes but didn't move toward the door this time. Progress, I supposed. Where were you last night? I asked, keeping my tone even. I already told you. I needed space, she said, brushing past me toward the fridge. Cut the crap, Rachel. Kyle saw you. At the bar. With him. Her hand froze on the fridge handle. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she turned around, her face a mask of irritation. Kyle? She said, her voice dripping with disdain. What, is he spying on me now too? God, do all your friends think I'm under surveillance? Don't deflect, I snapped. Just tell me the truth. Are you seeing someone else? She laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. You're unbelievable, James. You've already decided I'm guilty. So why bother asking me anything? Because I want to hear it from you. I shouted, the frustration finally boiling over. I want to hear you admit what I already know. Her expression hardened, and for a moment, I thought she was going to deny it again. But then something shifted. Fine, she said coldly, her voice like a blade. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing someone. Are you happy now? Does that satisfy your need to be right all the time? The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of my lungs. I stared at her, my mind scrambling to process what I just heard. How long? I managed to choke out. Rachel shrugged, as if the question was beneath her. Does it matter? How long? I repeated, my voice shaking. A few months, she said casually, like she was discussing the weather. Maybe longer. I felt my legs weaken, so I leaned against the counter for support. Why? She scoffed, her expression almost bored. Why? Because I'm tired, James. Tired of you, of us, of this boring, predictable life. I wanted something different, something exciting. Is that such a crime? Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. This wasn't just betrayal, it was contempt. Do you even care about what you're doing to me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel rolled her eyes again, her patience clearly wearing thin. You'll be fine. You always are. Honestly, this is probably good for you. Maybe now you'll stop trying to control everything and actually live a little. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't just unapologetic. She was cruel. I gave you everything, I said, my voice shaking. I trusted you. And this is how you repay me? Rachel sighed dramatically, like she was the victim in all of this. Spare me the self-pity, James. People grow apart. It happens. You'll get over it. I stared at her, feeling a mix of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief. This wasn't the woman I married. This was someone else entirely. Someone I didn't even recognize. You're unbelievable, I said quietly, shaking my head. Maybe, she said with a smirk. But at least I'm honest now. She grabbed her purse and walked out the door, leaving me standing there in the ruins of what used to be my life. The house felt like a stranger's space once Rachel walked out. Every corner, every piece of furniture seemed tainted with the weight of her betrayal. The quiet was oppressive, and for a while, I just stood there, staring at the door, hoping it would open again, that she'd come back and tell me it was all some twisted mistake. But she didn't. When I finally moved, It was to pour myself a drink. Something stronger than coffee this time. I sat at the dining table, the same one where Rachel and I had spent countless nights talking about dreams, plans, and a future I now realized was a lie. Her words echoed in my mind. I wanted something exciting. How could she say that after everything we'd been through together? Did she feel nothing for me anymore? Had she ever? My phone buzzed on the table, pulling me out of my thoughts. For a brief, pathetic moment, I thought it might be Rachel. But it wasn't. It was Kyle. "Hey," I answered, my voice hoarse. "Hey man, just checking in. How are you holding up?" I let out a bitter laugh. "How do you think?" "Yeah, I figured," Kyle said. "Listen, I don't know if this helps, but I did some digging. That guy she was with? His name's Chris. Works at some consulting firm downtown. He's not married or anything, but, well, let's just say he's got a reputation." "A reputation for what?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "For getting involved with married women," Kyle said. "I've heard stories. He's the type who thrives on the chase, doesn't care about the fallout." Hearing that didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. Rachel hadn't just chosen anyone. She'd chosen him. A man who saw her as nothing more than a conquest. "Thanks, Kyle," I said, my voice flat. "I appreciate it. You need anything, let me know," he said. I hung up without replying. What was there to say? The situation was spiraling out of control, and I was barely keeping it together. That evening, I decided I wasn't going to let Rachel walk all over me anymore. I pulled up our shared bank account and started reviewing transactions. Sure enough, there were charges that didn't add up. Fancy dinners, boutique purchases, and hotel stays that I hadn't been a part of. I transferred most of the money into a separate account. If Rachel wanted to play dirty, she'd find out soon enough that I wasn't just going to roll over. Later that night, I heard her car pull into the driveway. She walked in like nothing had happened, her expression calm, even smug. "You're still here," she said, her tone neutral. "Where else would I be?" I shot back. She shrugged, setting her purse down on the counter. "I thought you might need some time to cool off." "Cool off?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Rachel, you admitted to cheating on me. You've lied, you've humiliated me, and now you're acting like this is no big deal." She rolled her eyes, like I was some petulant child throwing a tantrum. "James, I already told you. People grow apart. It's not the end of the world. Don't you feel anything?" I demanded. "Any guilt? Any remorse? Or is this just a game to you?" She sighed, leaning against the counter. "You're making this so dramatic. I'm not the bad guy here, James. We both know this marriage has been over for a long time. You just didn't want to admit it." Her words were like a slap in the face. I stared at her, trying to process how someone could be so callous. "You're unbelievable," I said, shaking my head. "If it's so over, why haven't you left? Why are you still here?" Rachel smirked, a cold, detached look that sent a chill down my spine. "Because it's convenient. And honestly, I don't think you have it in you to do anything about it." That was it. The breaking point. "Get out," I said, my voice low and steady. Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said, stepping closer. "Pack your things and get out of my house." She laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Your house? Last I checked, my name's on the deed too." "Not for long," I said. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. If you want to fight, Rachel, you'll get one. But you're not staying here. Not anymore." For the first time, she looked genuinely surprised, maybe even a little nervous. But she quickly masked it with a smirk. "Fine," she said, grabbing her purse. "I'll go stay with Chris. I'm sure he'll be thrilled to have me." She stormed upstairs, and a few minutes later, I heard her suitcase thumping down the stairs. She didn't say another word as she walked out the door, slamming it behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had been. Part of me wanted to collapse, to give in to the grief and anger and heartbreak. But another part of me, stronger, fiercer, refused to let her win. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The house was quiet, but not the kind of peaceful quiet that came from solitude. This was the heavy, suffocating quiet of something broken. Rachel was gone, and for the first time in years the space felt like mine alone. Yet, instead of relief, I felt raw anger simmering just beneath the surface. I spent the next few hours sorting through the mess she left behind. Her clothes, her perfume bottles, the framed photos of us that once sat proudly on every surface. These things no longer felt like memories but artifacts of a life I no longer recognized. I piled her belongings in boxes, leaving them by the door. If she wanted to come back for them, fine. But they weren't staying here any longer than necessary. The next day, I started making moves. I contacted the lawyer I'd found the night before, a no-nonsense woman named Laura who wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. "You want a divorce," she said, her tone brisk. "And you want it fast. Am I right?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Then let's make it happen," Laura said, leaning forward. "The first thing we'll do is protect your assets." "Has she made any financial moves recently? Withdrawals, transfers?" "Not yet," I said. "But I moved most of our money into a separate account just in case." "Smart," she said with a nod. "Now, we need to document everything. Her infidelity, the lies, anything that could strengthen your case. Do you have proof?" I hesitated, then pulled out my phone. I showed her the photo of Rachel with Chris at the cafe and explained what I discovered about the hotel receipts. "This is good," Laura said, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the evidence. "Very good. If she tries to play dirty, this will give us leverage." It felt strange, laying my private life bare in front of a stranger, but Laura's confidence was infectious. For the first time, I felt like I had a chance to regain control. By the time I left her office, my anger had shifted into something sharper, more focused. Rachel wanted to treat this like a game? Fine. I'd make sure she didn't walk away unscathed. But Rachel wasn't the type to go down quietly. That evening, she called. The first time, I ignored it. The second time, I picked up, not because I wanted to talk to her, but because I knew she wouldn't stop until she got a response. "What do you want, Rachel?" I asked, my voice cold. "I need to come by and pick up some things," she said. Her tone clipped. "Your things are in boxes by the door," I said. "Take them and leave. We don't need to talk." "James, don't be ridiculous," she said, her irritation clear. "I need more than just clothes. I need access to the account. You're not getting access to anything," I cut her off. "Not after what you've done." Her silence was deafening. Then she laughed, a bitter, venomous sound. "Wow, you really think you're the victim here, don't you? You cheated on me, Rachel," I said, my voice rising. "You lied, you humiliated me, and now you want to act like this is my fault? You were impossible to live with," she snapped. "Always controlling, always suspicious. Maybe if you'd loosened up a little, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." Her words were like a slap in the face, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt. "Keep telling yourself that," I said, my voice cold. "But don't forget, this is on you, not me." "Fine," she said, her voice hard. "If that's how you want to play it, go ahead. But don't think you're going to come out of this clean, James. I'll make sure of it." "Good luck," I said, ending the call before she could say anything else. Her threat lingered in the air like a storm cloud, but I refused to let it intimidate me. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one. The next day, I started digging deeper. If Rachel was going to try to smear me, I needed to stay one step ahead. I went through old bank statements, emails, and text records, piecing together a timeline of her betrayal. What I found was worse than I expected. The hotel receipts weren't the only red flags. There were charges for gifts, dinners, even a weekend spa trip, none of which I'd been a part of. It wasn't just Chris. She'd been lying to me for far longer than I realized. Armed with this new evidence, I called Laura and updated her on what I'd found. She was pleased, but her tone remained serious. "James, this is good, but it's going to get ugly," she warned. "Rachel doesn't strike me as the type to back down easily. Be prepared for her to come after you with everything she's got." I said, my voice steady. "I'm done playing nice." For the first time in days, I felt something close to hope. This wasn't just about ending my marriage anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. But deep down, I knew Rachel wasn't finished with her games. And the next move was hers to make. It didn't take long for Rachel to strike back. 2 days after our last conversation, I got a notification on my phone. A fraud alert on my credit card. I called the bank immediately, and sure enough, there were several unauthorized charges. A designer handbag store, a luxury spa, a high-end electronics shop. I didn't need 3 guesses to figure out who was responsible. The woman on the phone was polite, but firm. "Mr. Parker, These transactions were made using your card. Do you want us to proceed with disputing them? Yes, I said, my jaw clenched. And I want the card canceled immediately. Rachel hadn't even tried to hide it. She'd used the card like it was her personal piggy bank, knowing full well it would come back to me. The next call was to Laura. She's going for the money, I said, pacing my kitchen. She's racking up charges on my credit card. What can I do? Laura's response was swift. I'll file a motion to freeze joint accounts and document the credit card abuse. She's digging her own grave, James. Let her keep going. Her words were reassuring, but they didn't quell the fire burning in my chest. Rachel wasn't just trying to hurt me. She was trying to ruin me. And then came the text. From an unknown number, though I'd have recognized Rachel's tone anywhere. You're pathetic. Canceling the card? Really? Don't think you're going to walk away from this unscathed. I have a lot more to say about you, James. Hope you're ready for the fireworks. The audacity of it made my blood boil. But instead of responding, I screenshotted the message and sent it to Laura. Keep it coming, Rachel, I muttered under my breath. Later that evening, I got a call from Stacy, Rachel's coworker friend. She'd been surprisingly silent through all of this, but now she sounded nervous, like she was about to deliver bad news. James, I think you should know something, Stacy said. Her voice hushed. Rachel's been telling people things about you. What kind of things? I asked, dread creeping into my stomach. She's saying you were controlling, that you yelled at her, isolated her, made her miserable. She's painting herself as the victim, Stacy said. I didn't want to believe it, but she's convincing. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was classic Rachel, spinning the narrative to make herself the hero and me the villain. Thanks for letting me know, I said, my voice tight. I'll handle it. Stacy hesitated. James, I don't think she's going to stop. She's really angry. Be careful. The call ended, and I sat there, fuming. Rachel wasn't just trying to ruin me financially. She was attacking my character. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I reached out to Kyle, who'd been supportive throughout this mess. She's spreading lies about me. I told him, I need to get ahead of this before it gets out of hand. Kyle didn't hesitate. Let's set the record straight. Start writing down everything, dates, incidents, anything that proves your side of the story. If she wants to play dirty, we'll hit back twice as hard. That night, I started compiling everything. The photos, the hotel receipts, the credit card charges, her texts. Every detail of her betrayal went into a folder, a damning record of the truth she was trying to rewrite. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. Rachel was charming, manipulative, and ruthless. She'd fooled me for years, and now she was using those same skills against me. A week later, the first bombshell dropped. A mutual friend called, sounding awkward and hesitant. James, I hate to bring this up, but Rachel posted something on social media, he said. About you. I opened Facebook, and there it was. A long, dramatic post from Rachel detailing her supposed escape from our toxic marriage. She described me as controlling, emotionally abusive, and dismissive of her needs. The comments were a mix of sympathy for her and outrage at me. People I hadn't spoken to in years were weighing in, some even messaging me directly to express their disappointment. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I called Laura. She's spreading lies about me on social media, I said, barely keeping my anger in check. What can we do? James, stay calm, Laura said. I'll draft a cease and desist letter. Defamation is serious, and if she doesn't stop, we'll take legal action. It was a small comfort, but I knew the damage was already done. Rachel's web of lies was spreading fast, and I had to act quickly to contain it. That night, I made a decision. If Rachel wanted to air our dirty laundry in public, I wasn't going to sit back and let her control the narrative. I crafted my own post, not an attack, but a clear and concise account of what had really happened. I included screenshots of her messages, the photo of her with Chris, and the financial records showing her reckless spending. It wasn't pretty, but it was the truth. When I hit post, my hands were shaking, but as the likes and comments started pouring in, I felt a small sense of relief. People deserved to know who Rachel really was. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. The truth was on my side, and I wasn't going to let Rachel win. The fallout from my post was swift. The same mutual friends who had jumped to Rachel's defense were now reevaluating their stance. Comments rolled in, some apologizing for believing her lies, others simply stunned at the extent of her betrayal. A few people messaged me privately, sharing their own stories of Rachel's manipulative behavior. But the one message that caught my attention came from a name I didn't recognize. Melanie Thomas. Hi, James. I'm sorry to message you out of the blue, but I think you need to know something about Chris. I stared at the message, my curiosity piqued. Melanie explained that Chris, the man Rachel had been seeing, wasn't just a serial cheater. He had a history of manipulating women for financial gain. Rachel isn't the first married woman he's targeted, she wrote. He's done this before. Once he's gotten what he wants, he moves on and leaves them with nothing. I've seen it happen firsthand. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Was Rachel just another pawn in his game? Or worse? Did she even realize it? I responded, thanking Melanie for the information and asking for anything else she might know. She sent me screenshots of Chris's old flings airing their grievances online, detailing the exact same patterns of behavior. It was almost comical. Rachel, who prided herself on always being in control, had been outplayed by someone even more ruthless than her. The next day, I sent the information to Laura. She was impressed. This is gold, James. If Rachel tries to claim victimhood, we can show she was complicit in the affair and that her partner has a history of this behavior. It weakens her credibility significantly. But I wasn't done. I decided to confront Rachel directly, not out of anger, but because I wanted to see her face when she realized the truth. That evening, I called her. What do you want? She asked, her tone dripping with disdain. We need to talk, I said, face to face. She hesitated, then sighed. Fine. Tomorrow. Coffee shop near the park. Noon. When I arrived, Rachel was already there, sipping an iced latte like we were old friends meeting for a casual chat. She looked composed, smug even, like she thought she was untouchable. Make it quick, she said as I sat down. I know about Chris, I said, skipping the pleasantries. Her expression didn't change. What about him? I know what he does, I said, leaning forward. How he preys on women, married women, for money. How he uses them until they're no longer useful and then moves on. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. That's ridiculous, she said. But her voice lacked its usual conviction. Is it? I asked, sliding my phone across the table. Take a look. She hesitated, then picked up the phone, scrolling through the screenshots Melanie had sent me. Her face paled as she read the damning stories, one after another. This is fake, she stammered, but I could see the cracks forming. It's real, Rachel, I said, my tone cold. You're just another mark to him. While you've been busy tearing apart our marriage, he's been laughing behind your back. She slammed the phone down, her hands trembling. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I said, leaning back. Go ahead. Call him. Ask him yourself. Or better yet, check your bank account. How much has he borrowed from you, Rachel? How much has he convinced you to spend on his business ventures or his emergencies? Her silence was answer enough. I trusted you, I said, my voice laced with anger and disappointment. I gave you everything and you threw it away for a con artist. Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She looked defeated, for the first time truly realizing the depth of her mistakes. James, she started, but I held up a hand to stop her. I don't want your apologies, I said. They mean nothing to me now. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. She looked like she wanted to argue, to fight back. But instead, she simply stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked out without another word. I sat there for a while, letting the moment sink in. For years, Rachel had been the one pulling the strings, controlling the narrative, but now the tables had turned. This wasn't just a victory, it was liberation. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was done. Done with Rachel, done with the lies, done with the toxicity. From here on out, I was going to rebuild my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The days after the coffee shop meeting felt surreal, like waking up after a long, suffocating nightmare. Rachel was out of the house for good. Her belongings, boxed and ready, had been picked up by a moving company she hired without so much as notifying me. Fine by me, her absence was the first real gift she'd given me in months. The divorce proceedings started to move forward quickly, thanks to Laura's no-nonsense approach and the mountain of evidence we'd compiled. Rachel's lawyer tried to push back, claiming emotional abuse and coercion on my part. But the evidence of her infidelity, reckless spending, and connection to Chris completely undermined her narrative. And then there was Chris himself. 2 weeks after our meeting, I got a text from Melanie. "You were right. Chris dropped her." I almost didn't believe it at first. But when Melanie forwarded me a screenshot of Rachel's angry social media post, thinly veiled, of course, blaming certain people for her newfound financial troubles, it all fell into place. Chris had drained her dry and moved on, just as I predicted. Part of me felt vindicated, but the larger part just felt tired. Rachel's downfall wasn't satisfying. It was just sad. She had burned everything she touched, and now she was left with nothing. But I wasn't going to let her mess define my life anymore. I started focusing on myself in ways I hadn't done in years. I went back to the gym, something I'd always loved but neglected during the tail end of our marriage. I reconnected with old friends who'd drifted away during the chaos. Some were hesitant at first, unsure of what to believe after Rachel's smear campaign. But once I told them the truth, backed by receipts, they came around. Work became a refuge, too. I threw myself into projects I cared about, earning praise from my boss and even securing a promotion I hadn't seen coming. For the first time in years, I felt like I was steering my own ship instead of being dragged by someone else's chaos. And then there was the night I ran into Stacy. I was grabbing groceries after work, minding my own business, when I saw her in the produce aisle. She looked surprised to see me, but not in a bad way. "Hey," she said, offering a cautious smile. "Hey," I replied, suddenly feeling awkward. "I've been meaning to reach out," Stacy said, glancing around like she was afraid someone might overhear. "I wanted to apologize for everything. I didn't know the whole story, and I shouldn't have taken sides so quickly." "It's fine," I said, shrugging. "You weren't the only one she fooled." Stacy hesitated, then sighed. Rachel always had a way of making herself look like the victim. I bought into it for a while, but after everything came out, well, let's just say I'm not surprised she's where she is now. "Where is she?" I asked, more out of curiosity than anything else. Stacy smirked, but there was no malice in it. "Back at her parents' house. She's been posting these cryptic messages online about starting over and finding herself." Typical Rachel. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but I couldn't muster the energy. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. "Anyway," Stacy said, shifting awkwardly, "I just wanted to say I'm glad you're doing better. You deserve it." "Thanks," I said, meaning it. As I watched her walk away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Rachel's influence on my life was finally fading, and the people who mattered were starting to see the truth. That night, as I sat in my now peaceful, quiet house, I realized I was finally free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, the constant sense of walking on eggshells. The life I had before Rachel was gone, but a new one was starting to take shape. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to it. Months passed, and with them came clarity. The divorce was finalized in record time, thanks to Rachel's inability to refute the evidence stacked against her. She walked away with little more than the clothes on her back and the tarnished reputation she'd built for herself. I walked away with my dignity and a future that was finally mine to shape. The house, once a battlefield of silent resentment and outright lies, transformed into a sanctuary. I redecorated, not out of spite, but to reclaim the space. The walls Rachel had once insisted be painted neutral, calming tones now bore bold, vibrant colors. The framed pictures of us were replaced with art I actually liked. It wasn't just the physical changes, though. The air felt different, lighter. One evening, as I sat on the newly reupholstered couch, sipping a drink and flipping through a book I hadn't had time for in years, I realized how much had shifted inside me. The anger, the hurt, even the bitterness, they weren't gone, but they didn't consume me anymore. Then came the letter. It arrived in the mail, tucked between junk flyers and a credit card offer. The return address was unfamiliar, but the handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. Rachel's. I debated tossing it straight into the trash, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. James, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I felt like I needed to say it anyway. I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed the trust we had, and I'll probably never forgive myself for that. You didn't deserve what I did to you, and I hope, in time, you can find it in your heart to let go of the anger. Not for me, for you. I've been doing a lot of thinking about why I did the things I did, and while I could give you a dozen excuses, none of them would matter. The truth is, I didn't value what I had, and by the time I realized that, it was too late. You were good to me, James, better than I deserved. I hope you find someone who sees that and treats you the way you deserve to be treated. Take care. Rachel. I set the letter down, my emotions swirling. Was it genuine? A last-ditch attempt to salvage her own conscience? Maybe. But it didn't matter anymore. I didn't feel the anger I expected, nor the satisfaction of vindication. Instead, I felt detached. Rachel's words were a closing act in a play I was already finished watching. I folded the letter neatly and put it in a drawer. Not because I needed it, but because it felt like a chapter marker in a story that was over. Life moved forward. I continued to build myself back up, brick by brick. Work thrived, friendships deepened, and even new connections began to form. There was no rush, dating wasn't a priority, but I allowed myself to be open to the idea. One day, while out hiking, a hobby I'd rediscovered during my newfound independence, I met someone. Her name was Emma. She was vibrant and genuine, with a quick wit that kept me on my toes. We started as friends, exchanging stories and laughs on the trail, but over time, something deeper grew. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It wasn't the kind of whirlwind romance that sweeps you off your feet and leaves you dizzy. It was steady, warm, and real, the kind of connection that felt earned, not just stumbled upon. Months later, as we sat together watching the sunset, Emma turned to me and said, "You seem so at peace now, like someone who knows exactly who he is." I smiled, the weight of her words sinking in. I think I finally am. Rachel had taken a lot from me. Time, trust, and years of my life. But in the end, I'd found something she could never touch, myself. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I realized something. The life I was living now wasn't just better than the one I'd left behind. It was the life I was always meant to have. This was my new chapter, and for the first time I was writing it on my own terms.